Yes, in today's session, we'll understand the basic introduction towards Azure. We'll understand different Azure components and the basic vocabulary. Let's get started. Azure, a cloud platform, a Microsoft cloud platform. I'll just increase the font a bit. Yes, a Microsoft cloud platform to store data, to perform ETL operations. ETL means, say, extract, transform, means to change the look and feel of your data, and load, to perform big data loads. For example, extracting data from various physical, on-premise, non-cloud data centers. Bring all the data together, format it, shape it, filter it, and then load it into some Azure SQL database or a warehouse. And also to perform big data analytics. Supported databases. We have OLTP. This is online transaction processing database. Purpose to store live real-time data. And in Azure, we use Azure Logical Server and Azure Virtual Machines to implement this OLTP. Data warehouse to store old historical data. It is mainly used for Azure Logical Server, also called SQL Pool implementations, we call it. OLAP, Analysis and Forecast Activities by Azure Analysis Services, AAS we call. So different types of databases, different Azure implementation styles. Here comes the concept of resource. What is resource? Resource means any component we create or simply say buy from or in Azure cloud, from Azure. For example, Azure SQL Server is a resource. Azure SQL Database is a resource. Or Azure SQL Pool is a resource. Or for example, in our classes, we'll take Azure Storage Account. It's a resource. So different resources. I repeat, any item we buy from Azure shop, maybe with our free account or paid account, whatever, any resource, any item we buy is taken as a resource. Like server is a resource. Same way, a database or historical data store called SQL Pool, we call POOL pool. It is a resource. Okay, next. From here, even the next classes will understand something called storage account. Right? We'll call it a storage account. It's a resource, etc. Then resource group. A group of resources or a collection of resources. For easy monitoring and billing. For example, a collection of few storage resources can be one resource group. Same way, a collection of few ETL resources can be another resource group, and so on. Here it is. Example, a collection of few related or relevant resources. Like for example, Azure SQL Server plus Azure SQL DB plus Azure SQL Pool. Okay, these three can be one resource, because in general server contains database and a warehouse in Azure. Let me show you here. For example, let me just show you existing resources and the resource group. Here you will see my server and database are forming one resource group. Some network and storage entities, related entities, form one other resource group. Observe carefully here. Some other entity, a different resource group, like this. What's the main advantage of resource group? Easy billing and easy monitoring. Yes, in our classes, we need to understand how to monitor and how to analyze our account. At that time, we need this resource group, just like folder for your files. Here we have resource group for our resource. Then comes another important technical term, service. It is an offering by Azure. An offering by Azure. Yes, it is free of cost. By default, free of cost for routine maintenance and security implementations. Example, Azure Active Directory Service. No additional payments are involved for this. I go to a restaurant. They would be having some kind of seating service, right? Isn't it? No extra payment for it. And then in most of the restaurants, they offer some welcome drink or at least some glass of water. In general, no extra payments for it. In general. Again, sir, do you want regular water or bottled water? Then the things go in a different way. In general, I'm just giving a small comparison for easy understanding. Right? Or other kind of services we get there, like the cutlery or whatever. Right? The ambience and other things. They're all part of service by default. And few services are partially free. For example, in Azure Monitor, in one of the next classes we'll take monitoring, no extra price is involved. But from monitoring, we have something called alerts. Monitor, metrics, alerts, etc. Here, monitoring and metrics, no pricing, but from there we can derive something else called alert. Okay, they are again chargeable. It's a service, but a charge would be involved. These are not resources. Okay, we don't create monitor, we don't create metric. They're already there. We are simply using them, linking to the resources. For example, here it is. This is the portal we get after we subscribe to Azure in next few minutes. There you see monitor, subscription, something called Active Directory for security, and something else called analytics tools, cost management tool. These are all services. Okay, so services are like offerings given or from Microsoft Azure. You click on, for example, this monitor service. From there we have something else called metrics, left side, called Azure metrics, another service inside the Azure monitor. I said resource group, right? The purpose of resource group is easy monitoring. Here it is. We need to identify the resource from this particular link. I'll just say cancel and show you carefully. Click on scope, something like this. We need to carefully expand the resource group, then select the required resource, something like this. Okay, here you go. You got resource group. Select which resource you would like to monitor and click apply. Something like this. Okay. So metrics is a service. No additional price is involved for this. And we do the actual metric activities here. Okay. Something like this. For example, say space used or something like this. And you get some report here on the screen. Okay, so what we are doing now, yes, we are having some idea on what is a resource, the first one, and what is a service next. From here, let's understand. From here, let's go back to our notes. Example, Active Directory for security, monitor, metrics, etc. These are all service. Then comes the concept of geography. Here it is. Physical location. A physical location, geography is taken as a physical location, okay, anywhere in the world, okay, pertaining to a continent or a country. This one. We also call it as geolocation or simply say geo. It's called geography. A geography has something called region, and region has something else called zone. Okay, and zone has something else called data center. Let's by heart these things carefully. Let's get the background information for it. Every resource we create in Azure needs few common properties. Number one, a unique resource name. Number two, a resource group. And number three, location. Number four, something called as pricing factor. This pricing factor is related to the compute units we call. Let's understand them slowly. So far we learned basic information about something called resource group, and service, a free offering from Azure by default. Now, every resource we create in Azure needs few common properties. Here it is. resource name. For example, in our next classes, we'll see how to create new resource. Whenever we go for a new resource, for a server, database, something called storage, etc., we actually search for the type of resource, because Azure cloud has lakhs of resources. Azure cloud has lakhs and lakhs of resources. Out of all these resources, which resource to use, which resource you wanted, it is taken care by a small search option. Here you go. For example, I'll take Azure storage and account. Here, of course, I have to say storage account. Storage account. Yes. Now you get something here. Click. I'm just giving a small example. We had to create our Azure account. We are still understanding some basic vocabulary. Click on storage account, say create. Once you click on create, okay, once you click on create, then it will ask you for the resource group, resource name. This is the resource name, storage account name, and region. See here, like East US, West US, South Central US, or something else like East India, South India, Korea, Japan, etc. Geographical locations, like where exactly you would like to host this resource, in which region on this planet you would like to host. Here it is. Location, or simply say region. We call it as region, this one. And pricing factor, like how much you would like to invest depending on the performance. For example, 1000 GB will be costing about $15 per month per storage account. Same way, depending on the type of resource, pricing would be involved. Here we are talking about location. Earlier you got the resource and resource group name above. Now we are talking about location. Here it is. Let's understand the location information. Geography, physical location, anywhere. Like for example, observe carefully. Here you go. Asia Pacific is one geo, multiple regions. Or Europe, another geo, multiple regions. US, another geo, multiple regions. So here it is, US or Europe, Middle East, Asia Pacific, these are all geo. Here it is. Example, observe carefully. Asia Pacific, okay. Next, US or Europe. Next, same way, for example, you have Canada, etc. Okay, next, Europe spelling, sorry, etc. These are all different regions. Now within each region, these are all different geos. Within each geo, you have multiple regions. Stay tuned, observe there. Region is an Azure network across the globe is divided into regions, or simply say each geo has multiple regions. Here it is. Each geo has multiple regions to host the Azure resources. Okay, let's see. Example, you take US first for easy understanding. Here you see East US, West US, South Central US, etc. Something like this. Now, we can create a resource in a region. This is the primary information for us. But that region belongs to a geo. Okay, remember this. One more thing. Later classes, we need them to understand few technical things like geo. So what does geo means? And what does region means? So geo is different, region is different. So we need to get those things carefully. They are interrelated to each other. Zone. What is zone? Let's see. Each region is divided into two or more zones. Yes, these are physically also called as availability zones. Also called availability zones. AZ we call it. Okay, or simply zones or availability zones we call. These are physically separate locations or separated locations within each Azure region that are tolerant to local failures, and that's why we call them availability zones. And failures can range from software failures to hardware failures. In the events of earthquake, floods, or fires, irrespective of all these natural calamities, our data should be available 24/7. Okay, here it is. An Azure availability group, or sorry, Azure availability zone is highly, number one, highly available, means 24/7 it is available. Number two, fault tolerant, very much resistant to faults, catastrophic failures, and more scalable than your company's traditional data center infrastructure. Now, in Azure, what is data center? Yes, here it is. A data center is a physical location within a given zone. A physical data center within a given zone. Here it is. A zone can have one or more data centers. In general, usually two or more. And here it is. One more important thing. I'll just put this way. Each data center has required infrastructure required infrastructure needed to host data and support something called ingress, means incoming traffic, and egress. By heart these things carefully, means outgoing traffic. Assuming we are very new to the Azure environment, we are taking the fundamentals first. Egress, incoming traffic. So ingress, incoming traffic, egress, outgoing traffic. We require these things to understand the monitoring part later. So we have total of 4 things: geo, region, zone, and data center in order. Here it is. A region, say, assume the entire white space is a geo. Geo has multiple regions. Take one region, you have multiple zones. In each zone, you have 1 or more data centers. That's how it is. Region has zones. Zones have data centers inside, well connected. This entire region is inside a geo. From here comes the pricing factor, compute units. Let's see. Another very, very important item, pricing units or pricing factors we call, and compute units. What we mean by compute, let's see. In our classes, sometimes we come across few resources. Like for example, I'll take this way. Say SQL database. Okay, I'll take some SQL database, and here it is. There is something called compute. Let me show you here first. These are all resources. Storage account is a resource, database is a resource, something called warehouse is a resource, etc. Few specific resources have something else called compute. This one, based on the type of compute, price would vary. Few resources will be involved per month cost. You change the compute, cost also gets modified per month. There are few resources wherein price is calculated per month, and there are few resources where we need to pay per hour billing. Here you go. Pricing factors and compute units. Every resource, let's understand here. Every resource involves certain cost and certain compute units. These compute units are responsible for allocation of resources to perform the required operations. What does it mean? Example, data processing operation in an Azure SQL database is controlled by something called DTU. Here it is, see here, something called DTU we call. Same way, let me show you one more to make it more clear. These are all the basic vocabulary activities we should be able to get it. Something called SQL pool we call, right, earlier. Dedicated SQL pool we call. Earlier we said DTU. Here something else called DW. Remember. I mean resource to resource, that so-called purchasing power, items will change. It's something like this. I travel from country to country, the currency will change, right? Same thing here. Resource to resource, compute will change. It's per hour billing. Earlier per month, now per hour. It is DW. Okay. So resource to resource, the compute power changes. SQL database, example. Azure SQL database is controlled by DTU, Data Transaction Unit, per month bill. Same way, data processing operations in an Azure SQL pool. Pool means data warehouse, historical data store. Old historical data is what data warehouse means. For that, we have something called DW, means data warehouse unit. It's per hour billing, something like this. It's per hour. This much amount per hour. And here is one more important thing. So every resource involves certain cost and compute units. These compute units are responsible for allocation of resources. Now, what are resources? Very, very important. In general, common resources are processor and memory. Remember. So, not only in on-premise, even in Azure also, we need this concept of processor memory allocations. For example, let's just get some idea. Let's get some idea on these so-called resources. For example, let's put this way. Let's understand what exactly this resource are. For example, the concept of processor memory means. So for this purpose, I'll take you to the monitor screen once again. SQL database is a resource, and here you can monitor CPU percentile, data file, log file, something like this, something called tempdb, memory, etc. So here we are understanding how to allocate processor, memory, etc. Something like this. Last 24 hours, this is how my CPU percentile is. Or for example, last 30 days, apply, and I see my CPU percentile, how it is. In Azure, back to our screen. So processor and memory are the two key resources. They are like the fuel to perform any operation. Okay, and here it is. Remember, the cost is involved based on the compute units. More compute units, more cost. Less compute units, less cost. That's how it is. So we have location information for a resource and pricing factor or compute units for a resource. So far we learned what is Azure and few basic vocabulary. And we are slowly understanding the concept of resource with respect to something called region, zone, and data center. From there comes the concept of pricing factor. From here, from where you pay, yes, here comes the concept of Azure account and Azure subscription. Two different components. We are now slowly stepping into our actual practice. We'll get our Azure account and Azure subscription. Both are different. Let's understand. So the concept of Azure account, Azure subscription. Here it is. Simple, straightforward information. Go home. Left side, there is something called a, here it is, subscriptions. Observe carefully. Something called subscriptions. Click on subscriptions. You'll get this interface anyway. We are yet to get our Azure account created. I'm just showing you some items before we continue. Here it is. You got subscription entry. Again, you got add, right? So my Azure account, okay, top right. That Azure account, this Azure account can be involved with multiple subscriptions. Why? Why like this? Yes. Assume an enterprise with multiple teams, dev, test, prod, assume. Dev can have one subscription, test one or more subscriptions, prod again another final subscription, something like this. So divide and rule policy. Each subscription will have a separate subscription ID for secured sharing of resources or any other kind of pricing related activities. And one more thing, we can also control the security, control the access. For example, testing team subscription, testing team manager and lead will have access to. Prod, admins will have access to it. Something like that. We can also have something called policies, security policies we can easily manage. So what is that now? Azure account and subscription. Here it is. Let's understand. To make it more clear, I'll just put this way. Okay. I'll say here item 1 to make it more clarity and clear. Basic vocabulary. Okay, basic vocabulary, that is first item. Next, here you go. And I'll put this way. This is called a resource, right? And every resource has resource name, location, and pricing tier. So in order you got resource group. Next, I'll call it as item number 2, location information, just formatting the notes for your easier reference. Number 3, pricing tier, pricing factor and compute units. Number 4, then we have Azure account subscription activities. Well, here we go. What is Azure account? Let's see. Azure account, and something called Azure subscription. Here it is, very important. Few new technical terminology will come in. We need it. Okay, we need it. Let's do it carefully, mainly towards our certification also. We require all these buzzwords or the keywords. We need them. Azure account. Here you go. We sign up for Azure, we get one account. We sign up for Azure, we get one account. Here, that gives something called as a directory and a domain. Okay, remember, directory and domain. Here it is, Azure account, an enrollment or sign up kind of activity. Okay, a new registration to Azure cloud. Every registration or account is identified by an auto-generated and unique directory ID. We call it as Azure directory ID. Remember, very, very important. This Azure directory ID is different. Something else called Active Directory is different. Okay. Azure Active Directory pertain to security. Directory refers to account. Just account, this one. Over the mouse, you get some directory. Also called as a default directory. And a domain is created. Okay, here it is. One unique domain is auto-created. In olden days, network engineers are involved, even till date, in few enterprises where they are not completely moved into cloud. There are few enterprises are still in on-premise. There, the network engineers should be involved in creating a domain, a network group kind of thing. Say, for example, Microsoft domain, Reliance domain, we call. Domain means a network of computers that may get well connected securely across multiple places in the globe. We said domain means a network. Now, a unique domain is auto-created for each Azure account. Okay, next. Here you go. There is something called, for example, just take the subscription once again. Click on the subscription. Okay, here it is. This is the directory I'm talking about. Contact SQL School .on.microsoft.com. Okay, domain is available. Next. This is from the account level. Then next step, we have something called subscription. There are few more things in Azure account. We'll take it next few minutes. Subscription. An account, an Azure account can have one or more subscriptions. What exactly it is? Each subscription is, or each subscription has a dedicated payment information. That's the first thing, like a specific credit card or a debit card. That's the first thing. Subscription means actually the payment information for automatic debits. Free trial, no problem. I'm talking about paid accounts. Payment dedicated information, and additionally, or simply say used by various teams. Like for example, we have dev team, test team, prod team, etc. Something like this. And each subscription has a unique subscription ID. Unique subscription ID. Okay, next, this one. Something called a subscription ID. Here it is. And of course, subscription name and particular currency value. Again, other subscription may have other currency value also. It depends. Okay, next. Go home. And here we have something called Active Directory Service. Active Directory Service. Here you see primary domain, right? This one. Azure AD. AD means Active Directory, a free service. Okay. Now, here you go. There is also something else called Tenant. This is very important, mainly for communications to the outside world, external, outside world. For example, yes, Azure is a cloud environment. There is another cloud environment called Snowflake. One more environment called, say, Google Cloud, Salesforce Cloud, so on. Now let's take one other cloud environment called, say, for example, Snowflake. Okay, assume. In Snowflake, we have something called external stages. Something called external stages. So here, one cloud has to connect to other cloud. There comes the concept of something called tenant. By heart these new technical terms. Here it is, back. And each Azure account has an associated tenant. What's the main purpose of tenant? Yes, outside world communication. For example, there is a nice reporting technology called Power BI. Here it is. Let me show you this way. A nice reporting technology called Power BI. In Power BI technology, there are different ways to get the reporting activities. Anything outside the cloud, we call it tenant. Something coming out of your cloud, out of Power BI cloud, it's a tenant. Something coming out of your Azure cloud towards Snowflake, it's a tenant. Tenant connections we call. This one, tenant ID. Back to our notes. Each Azure account has an associated tenant used for Azure cloud to external connections like Power BI, Snowflake, etc. So here it is. I'll say tenants are used. Okay, next. With this information, types of subscriptions. Number one, free trial. This is our actual requirement for our practice. Valid for 30 days or USD $200 credit usage, whichever is earlier. If I use all credits within 3-4 days, then you are done with the free trial. So let's use it wisely in our classes. About $200 credit will be given to us. Number 2, we have something called paid subscription, pay as you go. This one, let me show you. Go home, and my free subscription is no more, expired long back. This one, pay as you go, the subscription. Billing is always every month. At the time of creating the subscription, we need to provide the card details. Auto debit occurs based on the compute resources, storage, and other activities we do. So pay as you go, this one. Monthly bill, auto debit, and it is actually postpaid, okay? No prepaid, it's postpaid by default. The default option. So after end of the month, based on the usage, I would be charged. Next, auto debit, and the billing cycle usually varies from account to account, subscription to subscription. For example, here I have billing cycle 4/3, April 3rd to this one, say April month, 3rd date, that's how we read, to May, something like this. I'm right now in this billing cycle, April to May billing cycle as of now. Next, say 1 month. Okay, and for pay per hour resources, if you remember, there is one pay per hour resource, this one, right? Pay per hour data warehouse. The billing is calculated every hour. It's every hour. Example, a resource runs 69 seconds. Resource runs for 69 seconds. Okay. Then it means a 2-hour bill. That's how it is. Okay. Just like our mobile slab. I talk for 1.5 minutes. I'll bill for 2 minutes. It's like rounding off nearest one. Why like this? Simple. Microsoft says, by the time you stop the resource, it cannot be done immediately. Some additional background operations need to be done. It takes some time for cleanup and other activities. So this is an actual concept as on date. With this information, now where we are understanding slowly some basic activities. From here we need to learn how to get Azure subscription. In item number 4, here it is. Item number 5, free subscription. All you do is step number 1, visit portal.azure.in. welcome. There you see one link called no account. Create one. Here it is. Go to this website. I'll just show you in incognito mode. Prefer to always give your credit card details and all in the incognito mode if possible. If possible, you can. No account, create one. You'll do it after the class. Click on create one. It will take you to a form to supply your email address, just email address. Then once we supply the email address, you get a confirmation mail automatically. Okay, any email address is okay. Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, or Outlook, anything is fine. You get one confirmation mail back. Create one. Then specify an email address. Then you receive a confirmation mail. Click on the confirmation link and provide your name, address, and then mobile number for authentication. You get the OTP, then credit card details. Okay. A minimal charge of few cents or few rupees will be debited from your credit card for validation purpose. But again, it will be credited back in 2 to 3 business days. That's how it will be validated. Remember, you'll be taking only a free account. Free account is enough for our actual classes. Okay, next. Once you are done, again step number 2, visit portal.azure.com. Earlier no account, now you have account, so sign in. Then you see one Azure portal. This will be our welcome screen for our actual classes. Here it is. Once you log into portal.azure.com, you should see something like this welcome screen. From here, we are going to start creating resources and start working on storage and other activities. Okay, so first you make sure you get a free subscription so that we'll start our actual classes.